Welcome to In Focus, where we go one-on-one with the Republican field of presidential candidates. I'm Tara Wall, your host. In 2012, he was elected the 34th U.S. Senator from Texas, a former Solicitor General born to a Cuban immigrant. I sat down with Ted Cruz to talk about why he wants your nomination for president and a few things you probably didn't know. And joining us for this segment of In Focus is Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator Cruz.
Tara, it's great to be with you.
All right, well, let's dig right in. You announced in March, and one of the things I noticed you said in your announcement video was that the issue is that it's a divide between Washington and the rest of us. Yeah. Tell us how that relates to why you're running for president.
Well, America's in crisis right now. We are seeing stagnation, economic misery as people are struggling harder and harder to make ends meet. Wages are stuck in place. Young people coming out of school are not having the opportunity they should be having. And we can't keep doing what we're doing. We can't keep going down this road. If we go another 4 or 8 more years down this road, bankrupting our kids, assaulting our constitutional rights, receding from leadership in the world, I fear that we'll do irreparable damage to the greatest country in the history of the world. And so I'm running to get back to the common sense principles that made America great, to get back to the free market principles and constitutional liberties that are right at the heart of who we are as America.
Yeah, you have a number of issues that you talk about, whether it's big government, the IRS, economic growth, the Constitution, as you mentioned, immigration, many issues that we're facing. But what would you say is the biggest concern right now that is facing our country?
The single biggest concern facing the country right now is that today a majority of Americans believe that our kids will have a worse life than we did. 65%. That has never been true in the history of America until this moment right now. And I believe the central issue in the 2016 election is going to be reigniting the promise of America. And the way we do that is we get back to the core Judeo-Christian values, to the common sense principles that built America. We bring back jobs and growth and opportunity, and we do that through tax reform and regulatory reform. A simple flat tax that lets us abolish the IRS, and repealing Obamacare, pulling back all the federal regulators that have descended on small businesses like locusts. We do that through defending our constitutional rights. We have never seen such an assault on the Bill of Rights, on religious liberty, on free speech, on the Second Amendment, on our privacy. Instead of having a federal government that targets our constitutional liberties, if I'm elected president, we'll have a federal government that defends the constitutional liberties of every American. And we need to restore America's leadership in the world. Today, our friends and allies, they don't trust us. And our enemies, they don't fear us. We need to get back to America as a shining city on a hill, and that's exactly what our campaign is focused on doing.
And for you personally, I mean, talk a little bit about, for those who don't know you, the voters that are still getting to know Ted Cruz, how and why you personally became a Republican.
Well, you know, for me, as with most people, my family story is a big part of that. My mom is Irish-Italian. She's from Wilmington, Delaware. She grew up in a working class family. Her mom was the second youngest of 17 kids. She ended up becoming the first person in her family ever to go to college. She stood up to my grandfather, who was a difficult man. He was an alcoholic, and he didn't think women should be educated. And my mother stood up to her father, and she went to Rice University. She majored in math, graduated in 1956. Ended up working as a computer programmer at Shell in the 1950s and 60s at a time where there were very few women doing that. My dad was born in Cuba. And he grew up in Cuba. As a kid, my father fought in the Cuban Revolution. And he was imprisoned, he was tortured in Cuba as a teenager. And he fled Cuba in 1957. He came to America. He was just 18, he couldn't speak English. He had $100 sewn into his underwear. And his first job was washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And he worked full time, he paid his way through school, he went on to start a small business. Today, my dad is a pastor traveling the country spreading the gospel. You know, my family has lived the American dream. But you asked why I became a Republican or why I became a conservative, and it's precisely because of that family experience. When I was a child, my dad told me over and over again, he said, when we faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go? That's why all of us are standing up for freedom. Because when you are the child of an immigrant who fled oppression and came here seeking freedom, you realize what a blessing, how precious our freedom is. And that's why all of us are standing up and fighting to preserve it.
Along with that same, I guess, personal note, even, I guess, from a professional level, it may relate your family history, your dad. Tell us a little bit about who provided, I guess, the greatest influence on you professionally throughout your life.
Well, there's no one that tops my dad in terms of impact on me, but I'd point to two other people as well. The first was a gentleman named Roland Story, who formed a group called the Free Enterprise Education Center. And when I was in high school, I got very involved in their programs. And they would have high school students, we'd study free market economics. We'd read Milton Friedman and Hayek and Bastiat and von Mises, and we would study the Constitution. And we spent hundreds of hours reading the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, and we memorized a shortened mnemonic version of the Constitution. And then we toured the state of Texas, speaking about free market economics and the Constitution. And we'd begin, say we came to your Rotary Club, and you're sitting there having lunch. 5 high school students, we'd set up easels in the front of the room.
You guys were some ambitious high school students.
Well, we were inspired, is what I would say. And we would write the entire Constitution from memory in shortened mnemonic form. Then we would write a definition of socialism, government ownership or control of the means of production or distribution in an economy. Under the principle, if you don't know what it is, you can't identify it when you have it. And then we would write a quote from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. And in 4 years of high school, I gave about 80 speeches all over the state of Texas, and it inspired me, as I just mentioned. That combined with the emotional experience of my father's fleeing oppression, it became what I wanted to do in life. Was if you'd asked me at 15, 16 years old, what do you want to do in life? I would have said, I want to defend free market principles in the Constitution. I'll readily admit I was a weird kid.
So you saw this path for yourself, essentially.
I did. And a second professional influence that I'd be wrong not to mention is Chief Justice William Rehnquist. When I came out of law school, I was a law clerk to Chief Justice Rehnquist. He was an extraordinary Chief Justice, a deeply principled conservative who spent decades on the court defending the Constitution, and that became an inspiration for me as well.
Okay. Well, finally, that is quite an inspiration, actually, that entire story. I guess I could ask, tell me something that we may not know about you.
Well, you know, a lot of folks don't know that my parents went bankrupt when I was in high school. They had started a small business together. It was in the oil and gas business. And in the 80s, oil cratered. And they went bankrupt. They lost everything. We lost our home. And so when I went to college, they had no money to support me. And so I ended up taking about $100,000 in school loans. I worked 2 jobs to pay my way through college. And have paid off those school loans. I actually just paid off those school loans about 6 years ago. And, you know, I think that experience, the experience of struggling, the experience of understanding that the legacy we inherit as Americans is not riches in monetary form. The legacy we inherit as Americans is living in a land of opportunity where anyone with nothing can achieve anything. And I'll mention to you, I think that is going to provide a powerful contrast in 2016. I think the odds are very, very high the Democratic nominee is going to be Hillary Clinton. And the last couple of cycles, the Democrats' central narrative has been Republicans are a bunch of rich, out-of-touch aristocrats who don't give a flip about working men and women. Well, we can turn that narrative on its head. Hillary Clinton has made hundreds of millions of dollars exploiting her and Bill Clinton's government service. Hillary Clinton hadn't driven a car since 1996. I got to tell you, I can't wait to stand on that debate stage next to Hillary Clinton and see who can connect better, who can understand a single mom waiting tables, who can understand a truck driver in a bar, the working men and women who've been hammered under 6.5 years of the failed Obama economy. I'm fighting so that every American, particularly those struggling, have a fair opportunity to achieve the American dream. And I'll mention one other thing just as an encouragement. In 1980, we saw a grassroots movement sweep the country. Millions of men and women came together, became the Reagan Revolution. It turned this country around. We're seeing the same thing happen right now. In just 4 months of our campaign, we've had over 225,000 contributions at tedcruz.org. In all 50 states, all 5 territories, people all over the country going to tedcruz.org, supporting the campaign. Our average contribution is $68. That is the power of a grassroots campaign, and the way we're going to turn this country around is a grassroots campaign from we the people standing up to the bipartisan corruption of Washington and getting back to the principles that made America great.
Well, on that we'll end, I guess.
Right.
And I just want to thank you once again, Senator Ted Cruz, for joining us, and wish you lots of luck out there on the campaign trail.
Well, thank you so very much.
I'm Tara Wall. Thank you for watching In Focus. You can check out the series at GOP.com.